Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested.
And it's Jeremy from Tested.
And today we're doing a special feature on a new piece of technology. It's a car. Jeremy, This is the Chevy Bolt?
That's right, with a B.
B.
And even Chevy, acknowledges that there's some confusion with the Volt and the Bolt, but they decided to go with it. It's the Bolt.
So all disclaimers first, you have been looking for an electric vehicle for a long time now.
Well, I've been looking at electric vehicles. Like, we've all been following the Tesla, and even the BMW. Will test drove that. You guys shot a video about that. Was it just last year, maybe 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I've had my eye on those because they're pretty cool. It's whole new technology, and this was the first one to sort of cross the threshold for me.
And it crossed so much a threshold that you bought it. This is your car. It's not a loaner. And you've been driving it for
2 weeks.
2 weeks now. So we're going to give you some first hands-on impressions of the car. I want to learn about the technology of the car. Before we go for a test drive, what should I know about the car? How does this, similar to an electric vehicle like Tesla's cars, and how's it different?
Well, it's the first car to have a range of over 200 miles. It has an EPA range of 238 miles. First car to do that, less than $50,000.
Got it.
And actually it cost $30,000 after incentives. So that's the big deal. That's why it was on the cover of Wired, and it won a lot of awards this year. I think a lot of it has to do with it crossing that barrier to entry.
Battery capacity and the power efficiency and design of the car allows it to achieve over 200 miles on a full charge. What's that full charge take?
Well, it takes about 9.5 hours at 240 volts. So yeah, you want to get like a high level, they call it level 2 charger for home. Or it does support DC fast charging. You don't have that at home yet, but there's areas that you can go to use that. But yeah, so 9.5 hours to charge it from all the way at the bottom. The thing about with electric vehicles for me is there's what they call range anxiety. And up until now, you've had basically, if you're not looking at a Tesla, you're looking at a range of about 100 miles. With the BMW i3, it was less than that, but then they had a little motorcycle battery in the back that would get you another 80 miles. So really, the electric vehicles were very close range vehicles, very small radius. This one is the first one that made me feel like, okay, I could actually exist within a reasonable radius and never have to charge outside the home. So I mean, that's how I plan to use this. A lot of people who go EV, they're looking at like, well, how can I do road trips in an EV? I'm not there yet. Like, that's still too scary for me to actually plan ahead and look at the charging stations. I wanted a car that I could survive with around the Bay Area, around the entire peninsula.
Right, where in this area there are actually a lot of chargers in public places.
Yeah.
Now there's also another way to think about range, is that if you're just using a car for daily commute, you're probably not going to use more than maybe 30, 40 miles of driving.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah.
So you can think of 200-mile range of a car also meaning that you don't need to charge it every day.
Right.
But do you still charge this every day?
Well, there's no reason not to. You're going to use that energy at some point. You have to look at your utility bill to decide what kind of rate you want to go on. You're right. You don't have to charge it every day, and the battery is sophisticated enough so that you can run it down, you can charge it, you can top it off. You're right. So if you don't use up the battery charge, you charge as often as you need to.
Well, let's take a walk around the car and take a look at some of the external features before we get to the driving experience. All right, first let's pop the hood. Whoa, that looks sophisticated. First of all, there's actually something under the hood.
Yeah.
Because for the Tesla, there's nothing on the hood. They have a storage compartment.
That's right. So this is your electric motor down here. This is the controller for the motor. And it's still very clean. I expect it to stay much cleaner than an internal combustion engine because there's no oil running around. The only thing that I have to replace in here is the wiper fluid. I think after 150,000 miles, there's some other fluid I have to replace. Given I had my last car for 10 years and I only drove at 50,000 miles, I think I'm good with wiper fluid.
But there is a battery here.
Yeah,
like
isn't that
a
interesting?
standard car battery, but that's not the actual battery
No.
that it runs on, of course.
This is a standard 12-volt battery, and it is in every way a standard battery. So if I needed to jump another car, I could do that.
Wow, okay.
And a lot of the internal components, they need 12 volts. And rather than just stepping down the 400-volt battery, which is like the main $9,000 battery that's in the bottom of the car, they just threw in a 12-volt battery.
Very cool.
Oh, it's worth mentioning that the hood is made of aluminum.
Oh, okay.
So as I closed that, I felt it was very light.
So there are parts of this car that are made of aluminum for weight purposes.
Yeah, like the BMW i3, they did carbon fiber throughout. The whole frame's carbon fiber. With this one, they made the hood and the doors aluminum just to cut down on weight.
And you notice that when you slam the door, when you slam
Yeah,
the hood, it takes a little bit extra force.
A few times I've closed the door and it hasn't closed all the way. I think it takes a little extra force because the doors are a little bit lighter. So the charge port's right here. Press to open. It's got standard level 2, and then I go with a DC fast charging option. Yeah, the level 2 is something, it uses a 240 volt outlet, just like, say, probably your old electric dryer would. And yeah, it runs 30 amps. So yeah, it takes quite a lot of power, and you can actually see your electricity bill spike when you plug it in.
Oh wow. Okay. It's a big front windshield. I'll see this big block right here.
Yeah, so that you can, if you look from the front, I never noticed, you can actually see the camera. That is
okay.
that scans the road and it watches for your lane dividers, so that it's not autopilot, but it's like the baby version of that. It will, if you start to cross out of your lane, it will steer your car back into your lane.
Got it.
However, testing that is a little scary, so I've only done it once or twice. It works most of the time.
Lane correction.
Yeah, exactly. There's cameras underneath the rear view mirror, or the side mirrors here, and there's also one on the front and one on the back for a bird's eye view system that I'll show you a little later.
How many total cameras on this car?
That's a good question. We could count them.
Yeah, it looks like a lot so far. And then storage. We of course have our gear here.
Yeah,
but plenty of storage.
It's a funny size car. Chevy calls it a crossover, which I think is pushing it a little bit. That's being a little generous. But my favorite thing about the storage is in the back, once you do have a full trunk here, but underneath here you have a whole separate compartment area. So I keep all the stuff I throw in my trunk down here, so that what's left over is just flat space that anybody can throw things in.
So you got the motor and some electronics under the hood, battery under the base, and storage in the back. I didn't see a spare tire.
There is no spare tire.
No spare tire.
No, and that I got to tell you, like, that is a concern for me. I have had flats in every car I've ever owned. So I'm waiting for that to happen. They tell me that the wheels are self-sealing.
What does that mean?
Space age. I bet it's a marketing term, and I expect to have a flat tire and to be punching the OnStar button before the car is sold.
Okay. Well, let's go for a test drive and see what that driving experience really is like.
Let's do it.
All right, Jeremy, we're in your Chevy Bolt.
All right, and I'm using what is probably the feature that went fastest from most maligned to most beloved.
Most beloved feature? You mean that it runs on electric?
No, the heated steering wheel.
Are you serious?
I'm not kidding. When dude told me that it had one, I joked with him about who could live without it. Now I am that guy.
Wow, heated steering wheel, a luxury item. Okay, seriously though, what is the driving like on this car? How does it compare to, even driving non-EVs, not even hybrids for a long time? How does it compare to your old car?
Well, let's just set the baseline here. A lot of people drive EVs for different reasons.
Yeah.
I decided that I wanted to have an electric vehicle for two main ones, and that's for that instant torque that people talk about.
Right.
Which is that off-the-line acceleration, because the motor doesn't have to spin up. The battery power just goes straight from battery to motor to wheels instantly, and that's a lot of fun. I love that feeling. It's like closest thing I ever had to that was probably the boosted board. Before that, a golf cart.
You talk about foot hitting the accelerator, and instead of having to rev up, you're going from 0 to 60 relatively quickly.
Well, and this is off the line. It has a 0 to 60 time of 6.9 seconds, so it's quick.
Now, along with that, when I was test driving the Tesla, for example, on the flip side, it also means that you don't coast in an EV like you do with a regular gas-powered car, where if you let your foot off the accelerator, you can coast for a little bit.
That's right.
What's the case with this car?
This car, it will coast by default. In fact, every time you turn the car on, it's sort of in that mode. But it also has another feature that, as far as I know, was innovated by BMW with their i3, the electric car you guys reviewed a while ago, which is what they call one-pedal driving. And so in this car, if I let go normally, now we're coasting. But if I switch it into low,
it just
stops.
Stops.
Actually, we're at a complete stop. I never touch the brake.
Oh.
And so what that does is it engages the regenerative braking for you when you release the accelerator, just as if you're stepping on the brake. Yeah, you do have to brake if you're going downhill, like on a steep hill like we have in the city, but that's really the only time. I can drive through the city if I take relatively flat roads and never touch the brake. That's
Or I imagine if you need to suddenly brake, you have to slam on the brakes still.
You always have the option.
Right.
The brake pedal's always there.
All right, but there is a coast mode, normal drive mode. If you let go of the accelerator, you will coast to a stop.
Yeah, interestingly, it doesn't remember that setting for you, though. You always have to switch it down into low.
Got it.
The other way to switch up the driving performance is by hitting the sport button.
Okay.
And what that does is it just changes the acceleration curve of the accelerator pedal. I mean, it's all electronic.
Yeah.
So it just changes like how much juice is sent to the motor on the first, part of the pedal throw.
Right, and that's really interesting because that's a program. It's a setting.
It's literally software.
Have they said in the future it'll let you customize that curve, that acceleration curve? So sport mode for you could be sport mode with something else. What's a trade-off if you enable sport mode? Are you losing a lot more battery life, or just changing how much pressure you're putting on the accelerator?
Theoretically, you could drive the same if you just learn what you want is on the accelerator. Like here, I'm in sport mode, but I'm still accelerating slowly. It's just easier to punch it,
Yeah. Oh, that's nice.
And start going.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, and we're going uphill.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun to drive in that mode. I think you probably do lean towards spending more energy that way. So that's why it has the option. But for me, I'm not looking to use 238 miles today.
Yeah.
So most of the time, I'm okay, driving slightly inefficiently in favor of having a little more fun.
Now, you talked about range anxiety as something that people who own EVs go through, as opposed to looking at a gas meter. You're looking at bars and a number telling you your approximate range. How accurate is that, have you found? And are you glancing at that number as you drive?
I haven't done a road trip. I'm looking forward to doing something like, going on like a 90-mile trip where I can go there and back, something like Santa Cruz, maybe even Monterey. But I haven't done something like that in the 2 weeks that I've had the car. So I can't say exactly how precise that is. I will say that GM did a thing where they lent a bunch of press, a bunch of bolts, and they drove from Monterey to Santa Barbara. And they all made it there with miles to spare, and it was an accurate reading.
Do you find the rate that the level is telling you that the rate is decreasing is consistent? Does it slow from 230 to 210 slower than 210 to 190? Like you would a smartphone battery. You know how like the top 20% of your smartphone battery is sometimes, it feels like it's the slowest to discharge.
That's a good question. I honestly, I think I need to do a real road trip to test that out, because I've only ever used like 25 miles of range, and then I'm back at home.
Which is your daily commute.
Exactly, and then I'm charging again. There was the second reason I wanted to mention why I wanted to get an EV, in addition to that instant torque, and that's never having to go to a gas station again.
Yeah.
I just think that that's awesome. I love driving. I have been thinking about that for the past year, about just driving past gas stations and just thinking that's just a real bummer that I have to go and charge up there. Basically, I realize that I'm still spending money on the fuel, even if it's a lot more efficient. I still have to spend money on the fuel. It's not that. It's the fact that I get to refuel at home.
And then that amount of convenience actually matters to you.
Absolutely.
Like has a meaningful impact on a day-to-day, week-to-week driving a car.
I love that. It's because everything else in my life recharges at home. Now my car can too.
All right. Well, I'd love to go drive this car if you'd let me for a little bit.
I would love
hands-on time
Absolutely.
with it, and then we can talk about maybe some electronics.
All right.
All right. Seatbelts on for safety. Heated steering wheel.
What do you think, right?
It's weird.
Yeah.
This is the heated toilet seat of driving.
It's totally
completely unnecessary.
Oh my God.
But once you have it, you're gonna get used to it. Okay.
So you press the side button in.
All right.
And then do what you just did.
And then drive.
Yeah, now you're
So
good.
you have reverse, neutral, drive, and then the low, which is what you were doing to get the braking, regenerative braking activated. So normal drive, yep, feels like driving a car.
Yeah.
No problem. I can let go. I still do feel that it's braking a little bit. even though I'm coasting right now?
Well, you can see you're regenerating 3 kilowatts right now, or 4.
Okay.
So if it's green, you're generating, and if it turns yellow, then you're using.
Ah,
So yeah, there is some regen,
right.
but it's just not as strong.
Not as strong. Let's talk about the dash experience, because there are 2 big screens here. There's a screen here and a screen here.
Yeah.
The thing I thought is that these screens, even it's pretty bright out today, they're very readable.
Well, they're very big. I mean, like this is a 10-inch display. That I'm not crazy about the UI. It's kind of nuts. You know, they went with a nice aesthetic, but it's not terribly useful. It took me a long time to find the clock, actually, oddly, but it's up here. And then when I went into CarPlay mode, it changes position into like the standard CarPlay position. That's one of my complaints. Is I wish there was even just a digital clock somewhere on the car, maybe on the dash or something up here.
Right.
I would like a little LED clock or LCD clock.
Is this the home screen right now?
Well, it is. It's what you get if you hit home, but then this is what I would think of as actual home, which is all of your sort of apps, where you go into all of your settings or
So your
audio,
phone, you can dial, you have a gallery. What I noticed is that there's no map. A lot of home screens on cars is GPS. It shows you navigation.
My last car had a DVD drive in it, and of course you could get updated discs if you ordered them.
Yeah.
This has no mapping system. The only internal mapping ability that it has is if you subscribe to OnStar, and you can send from your phone directions to your car. Now I've tried that, and as far as I can tell, you get very minimal instructions on this smaller display.
Turn my turn.
The only way to actually get a mapping system is to use CarPlay.
Okay, so your phone's connected. This is CarPlay. It's actually the first time we've shown CarPlay untested. You have a home screen, much like you do on your iOS device, including a home button here.
Yep.
And that's a touch screen.
Well, you're already at the home screen.
Right. And then responsiveness, okay, that's not bad. It's not very high frame rate. I can still see like it's like it's not 60 FPS.
I keep waiting for a car to have as high frame rate UI. Like, I don't know why they just don't prioritize that. But
now, are these the apps that you've downloaded on iOS that have a CarPlay version?
Is there? I'm not even sure I have Spotify on my phone. So this might just be a standard icon set that you get for Spotify. I might be wrong about that. But I don't use Mixcloud or Spotify. Maybe I have the apps. But in any case, there aren't that many apps that are blessed.
Right. Blessed with a CarPlay version.
Right.
So what can you do? What can you do when you plug in your phone?
Well,
Maps.
the nice thing is Maps. You know, you can. It's a pretty sweet version of Apple Maps. You know, it's a much bigger screen, and almost everything is Siri controlled. Interestingly, if you pull up text messaging, I suppose I could do that. It won't show anything incriminating. I can go to show messages, and it won't show any actual text. Only people that I've texted to or received text from, and if I tap one, it will read the previous text to me. It won't ever show me anything to read.
So this is maybe Apple not wanting you to look at the screen to read text. It's only Siri-enabled voice dictation.
Precisely.
It's both for send and receive.
Yep, and same thing, so if I want to send a text, it's all done by voice.
How do you feel about the overall CarPlay experience? Have you had good connectivity?
Well, right now it's being a little flaky. When I first got the car, the volume had a weird lag to it. Like you would increase the volume, and then a second or two later, it would happen on screen. Since then, that's figured itself out. I don't know, it doesn't seem 100%. But then again, a lot of Apple stuff doesn't seem 100% right now. Right. So it's up to them.
Now, if you don't have an iOS device, Android device, and you don't want to plug it directly in, you can also still Bluetooth your music to the car.
Yeah, I noticed with the Bluetooth though, listening to tracks where there's a seamless transition from track to track. If you're listening to Bluetooth, it will duck. The audio will fade out and then back in at the end and beginning of each track.
Interesting.
So if you have an album that's intended to keep playing from track to track, that's really distracting. Yeah. Oddly, with CarPlay, that doesn't happen. So I try to play through CarPlay. But actually, a lot of times, if it's a short trip, I don't feel like plugging in the USB cable. I will just go to Bluetooth.
Now, I see also USB 1 and USB 2. There are multiple USB ports in this car.
Yeah, 4 of them. Yeah, but no, the charge ports, we should test the output on those. Because as far as I know, they might be standard USB or they might be higher power. We should check it out. So if you flip this down, suddenly the rear view mirror becomes a video display. And
what?
Yeah, it's...
Okay. So right now, it's perfectly positioned for me. Like, you can look in the mirror and you see it off angle. I'm looking and I see this guy behind us.
Yeah.
And of course, with the 2 headrests of the rear passenger seats, if I flip it, it's actually looking at their car, it's a pretty wide angle.
You
field
see
of
a
view.
little bit more. You certainly don't see anything that's in your back seat. So it's nothing but what's behind you.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's nice while you're parked, perhaps, or maybe at a stoplight. I don't find it to be very useful or maybe even safe while you're traveling at speed.
Why is that?
Because when you're traveling and you're driving and you're always looking forward, your eyes are focused on 100 feet in front of you,
Focus to infinity.
wherever the car is in front of you is going to be at quite some distance. Then to glance in your rearview mirror, normally you're looking in just the opposite direction, but still at just the same distance because the mirror reflects the object behind you, which is the same distance. You don't focus on the plane of the mirror, you focus, through it in order to focus on whatever is being reflected. In the case of the display, you have to focus on that plane. It's almost like, and you're focusing on your steering wheel or something that's very close to you.
It's like looking at an image. I mean, it is an image,
Yeah.
a photo, as opposed to, and you're shifting focus
It
from
takes
far
time.
away to close.
It takes time to do that. When you're glancing in the mirror, you don't want to have a lag while your eye has to refocus on it. And it's not something that takes a second or two. It probably takes less than a second. But still, that's valuable time while you're driving. And I'm not comfortable doing that. I want to glance very quickly. I want to be back on the road in less than a second, not wait for the eyes to focus.
And even though it's a wide field of view, it's not actually as detailed as if you squint your eyes and look at in the distance. You can see more with the mirror in the distance.
Yeah.
It's still limited by pixels in the camera.
Sure.
But so far, driving it's pretty smooth. There's no big difference between driving this and, my car that I have.
Yeah.
It's pretty comfortable.
Yeah, it feels sturdy to me. I really like the feel of the steering wheel. It's fatter than my old one. I like that it's leather wrapped. And my one issue with the steering wheel is probably the buttons on it. I don't know if you bothered with looking down at any of those yet, but there are literally 20 buttons on the steering wheel. I counted them.
20 buttons.
20 buttons. I mean, that's more, if you think about it, that's more than an Xbox 360 controller.
What are they for?
Well,
Cruise control?
God knows. I mean, obviously there's the heated steering wheel controller. There's cruise control. There's your basic cursor functions for controlling what track you're on and controlling that whole display. There is there's an emergency braking feature where if you come up to a car too quickly, the car will alert you and then also brake if you fail to. That is controlled on there. There's volume control. There's favorites control. It goes on, and that doesn't even get into the windshield wipers and the blinkers and the whole sidearms. That's strictly what's on the steering wheel. To me, absurd. Absurd to the point of being funny. I mean, you don't need 20 buttons on your steering wheel. And that is the case study reason for why people are looking forward to an Apple car. Because this is what they will put on the big screen when they reveal their solution to car UI.
Simplify, the UI. Even though you may memorize it, I mean, there's a lot of stuff here that I don't think I'd ever use. Hanging up the phone, for example.
Right. Well, there's a Siri button. And what's ironic is that that's all legal. You can't touch your phone. You can't even press the Siri button on your phone, or you'll go to jail. Or you won't go to jail, but you could potentially get a ticket for that.
Yeah.
20 buttons on your steering wheel, totally legit. So the Tesla Model S60, which is the battery equivalent Tesla to this car, they both have approximately the same range. Bolt owners would proudly say that they have maybe 20 miles more range. But both 60 kilowatt hour batteries, or 60 kilowatt batteries, they have 5.5 0 to 60. This has 6.9. So they still managed to get a little more pep. Now, I don't know if this screen reflects the period that we've been in since you started driving or not, but our score is negative 2.3.
Oh no!
Yeah, so we are not
I'm hurting
exemplary.
your driver gamer score.
We are not exemplary EV drivers, but you know what? That's totally cool. Our technique is fine. The terrain we've chosen to drive on is average. The climate settings, that's where we killed it. It's climate settings and outside temperature. Can't control the outside temperature.
Well, too much warming of the
That's right.
seats, front seats, rear seats, and steering wheel.
Hey, I don't think we mentioned that. We also have front and rear seat heaters.
So is that standard?
No. In fact, we haven't mentioned that. Like, this is a maxed out Bolt. Every option was checked on it. And part of the reason I did that was because the cost difference between the min and max spec is $7,000. You compare that to a Tesla, you're talking about a difference of $40,000.
Right.
Huge. Now, granted, Teslas have full autopilot capability. That's one of the options you can check. And even if it's not enabled yet, you still get all the hardware. It's got awesome, capability. That's not here. That said, a $7,000 difference between min and max is interesting. But you also, there's one battery SKU for this. There's one motor SKU. It's all Bolts feel the same. The only differences are technology packages.
All right. Well, we are a couple hundred miles into your ownership of this car.
Yep.
Jeremy, we're going to have to check in once you've done a couple road trips. But thanks for sharing your first driving experiences with your Chevy Bolt and letting me take it for a little bit of a test ride.
Sure, my pleasure.
And we will have more coverage, more impressions. You can always find Jeremy on our podcast every week, where I'm sure you'll be talking about your testing of the Chevy Bolt.
My testing, yes. Always be
And
testing.
We'll see you guys next time.
Adios.
Bye.